Okay, the question is, why good people become monsters? That's the question in everyone's minds, right? Well, it starts with a single choice. Maybe you turn a blind eye to a colleague's harsh remark. Maybe you click approve on a document that harms thousands of people you'll never meet. Or maybe you ignore the neighbor's screams because you'd rather not get involved. Whatever it is, that one small moment feels insignificant at first. So insignificant, you can't imagine it's the spark of something monstrous. But history and psychology show otherwise. Sometimes it's exactly these little decisions that pave the path to unimaginable cruelty. You see, most of us have grown up believing monsters are born bad. We find comfort in the idea that there's a genetic flaw or a sinister streak that separates us from them. But the grim truth is that some of the most devastating atrocities in history, the mass tragedies, the systematic abuses, the backroom betrayals, weren't done by fanged villains. They were done by people who once saw themselves as kind, or at least normal. People who swore they would never cross a line, until they did. Ask anyone who's studied these horrifying transformations, and they'll tell you it often happens in slow motion. A good person bends the rules just a bit, then a bit more, until one day they've become the villain of someone else's story. This is the journey we're about to explore, a journey into how ordinary kindness can twist into cruelty and how empathy can erode into chilling indifference. But what if the most terrifying part is how easily any one of us could be next? Stay with me, because the first subtle cracks are just beginning to show. Imagine you're at a crowded office meeting. Your boss ridicules a junior coworker, mocking their work ethic in front of everyone. You flinch, but you say nothing. After all, it's not your place, right? Later, a friend vents to you about how cruel your boss is. You brush it off. He's just strict. He means well. That's the first seed planted. You excuse a small act of aggression or unfairness because it seems minor. The next time it happens, you might flinch less. Eventually, you're so used to it, you barely notice. History books are littered with such small betrayals. Consider everyday citizens in times of conflict who complied with oppressive measures, refusing to serve minorities at restaurants, signing off on unethical policies, or labeling entire groups as threats. This phenomenon isn't ancient. Even in recent controversies like rumored corporate cover-ups or hush-hush deals, people shrug and say, "I'm just following orders." Each time they do, a bit of their moral compass rusts. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo called this the Lucifer effect, explaining how ordinary individuals can slip into the role of perpetrator, often without conscious intent. But it doesn't take a famous experiment to see it happen. Watch any workplace scandal unfold. At the start, employees might gossip in hushed tones, complaining about shady practices, yet most comply, hoping things won't escalate. Over time, small betrayals pile up, normalizing behavior they once considered unthinkable. And by the end, people stand around asking, "How did we get here?" The real horror, of course, is that it was never one big leap. It was a series of tiny steps. These seeds may seem harmless, but they're already burrowing deep. If you think it ends here, think again. Because fear is about to water those roots in ways you won't believe. Fear is a powerful sculptor of human behavior. It doesn't merely freeze us, it rewires our brains. When danger looms, physical, social, or financial, we become more willing to do things we'd otherwise condemn. Consider how a once friendly group can turn on an outsider when they're told that outsider is a threat to their safety or status. We've seen entire communities shift from tolerance to hostility overnight when rumors spread. They're stealing jobs. They don't share our values. Such statements might begin as whispers in dark corners of the internet, but they escalate quickly. Before long, people you considered neighbors might be endorsing harsh policies or chanting dehumanizing slogans. They're not necessarily hardened bigots. They're afraid. And fear is cunning. It pushes us to protect ourselves and our group at any cost. The infamous Stanford prison experiment revealed how fear of losing control transformed mild-mannered students into harsh enforcers. The more prisoners resisted, the more guards escalated aggression, as if forced into it. Yet it wasn't only the environment, it was also the participants' fear of appearing weak, fear of losing authority, or simply fear of failing the role they were assigned. In everyday life, fear might stem from something as mundane as losing a job or social standing. People might sabotage colleagues, spread rumors, or stand by while injustice unfolds. Anything to avoid becoming the next target themselves. Whether it's a small town suspecting a mysterious stranger or a modern office worried about layoffs, fear becomes the perfect breeding ground for monstrous decisions. The tragedy is that most of these individuals would claim they're still good people, acting under duress. They don't see themselves as transformed. They see themselves as survivors. Fear may twist the mind, but power can crush it entirely. Brace yourself, because the lure of authority will expose a darkness even fear can't contain. If fear is one side of the coin, power is the other. Give someone a taste of authority, no matter how small, and watch how quickly their moral boundaries can expand or crumble. It might be the boss who has the final say on promotions, or the official with the authority to grant permits. At first, they might exercise caution, determined not to abuse their position. Then a conflict arises, and they decide, well, maybe I need to assert my power a little more. Over time, what started as measured leadership can morph into full-blown tyranny. Stories abound of law enforcement officers who began their careers full of idealism, only to be gradually eroded by the harsh realities of the job. One minor push, one instance of excessive force excused, and soon it becomes routine. We hear controversies about certain officers allegedly covering up for one another or bending the rules for personal gain. Often, these individuals never set out to be cruel. They just learn that power can shield them from consequences, so they push further. Corporate CEOs aren't immune to this lure. Rumors have surfaced about top executives ignoring ethics to maximize profits, dumping toxic waste into rivers or slashing safety regulations to meet a quota. When confronted, they might say the numbers demanded it or the board insisted. But in truth, they sense their power grants them a special pass, and that pass can be dangerously addictive. In short, power corrupts in increments. You wield it just a bit more harshly each time, telling yourself it's necessary. By the time you look back, it can be shocking to realize how far you've strayed from the empathy you once embraced. But power rarely works in isolation. Prepare to step into a world where an entire system can quietly turn everyone into cogs of cruelty, without a single villain in sight. Monsters don't always act alone. In fact, most of the worst outcomes occur when entire systems, bureaucracies, industries, communities are set up to channel cruelty in polite, everyday forms. Think of a clerk stamping "denied" on a refugee's application because that's the policy, never meeting the person whose life they've just placed in peril. Think of an accountant who shifts funds to shady shell companies because everyone does it, ignoring the communities harmed by financial corruption. In these setups, no single person feels like the villain. Each individual has a small, compartmentalized role. Together, though, they form a vast machine that churns out injustice. It happens in government agencies, corporate conglomerates, even small teams. Everyone's just doing their job, so no one bears the full burden of guilt. That's the trick of systemic evil. It's subtle, normalized, and often disguised as necessary procedures. Rumors swirl about entire industries, like certain fashion brands alleged to underpay laborers in unsafe factories. Yet the consumers keep buying because it's cheaper, and the managers keep producing because it's profitable. Meanwhile, the suffering remains hidden, and everyone absolves themselves by saying, "I'm not the monster here. I'm just following the chain of command." Yet even in these towering systems of brutality, individuals sometimes break away. Get ready to see how the faintest glimmer of regret can spark a massive turn. and what it really costs to seek redemption. Here's a twist. Some individuals on that downward path manage to yank themselves out of it. It usually takes a jarring event, a personal trauma, a shocking realization, or an encounter with someone they've wronged. Former extremists have shared stories of how they saw the light after a direct confrontation with a victim or after witnessing a tragedy they'd helped enable. But redemption arcs aren't always so neat. Skeptics question whether these transformations are genuine or just PR stunts. Take the corporate whistleblower who claims remorse after years of enabling corrupt practices. Are they truly sorry or just looking to cut a deal? Still, even if motivations are murky, these moments of moral awakening can spark real change. They can lead to confessions that expose bigger webs of corruption, or they can inspire others to leave toxic environments. The path to redemption is rocky. Societal judgment can be harsh, and the individual often battles intense shame. Some might try to disclaim full responsibility, saying, "I was forced into it," or "it was the system." Others accept the blame wholeheartedly, vowing to spend their lives making amends. Their journeys stand as proof that even those who've done monstrous things can choose to step back from the edge, if they dare face the person they've become. Redemption might save a soul or two. But what about the rest who never take that step? Wait until you see how an entire community can either sink deeper or rise as silent heroes. If evil can be banal, sometimes heroism can be too. Small acts of goodness carried out by ordinary people might be all it takes to derail a looming catastrophe. When entire communities band together to protect persecuted neighbors, refusing to give up a single family to the authorities, they show that simple decency can be powerful. Nobody needs to wear a cape or deliver grand speeches. They just need to refuse the daily invitation to become complicit. Consider the stories of small towns that stood against oppressive regimes. Civil servants quietly forging papers so targeted citizens could escape. Neighbors lying to officials about who lived next door. Such acts rarely make headlines, but can save countless lives. In the corporate world, a brave staffer might blow the whistle on fraudulent data, or an intern might speak up about shady practices. These people risk social isolation, retaliation, even losing their jobs. They're not saintly, they're scared like everyone else. But they choose courage anyway. We often overlook these lesser-known heroes because they lack the cinematic flair we crave in redemption stories. Yet their quiet defiance is precisely why they matter so much. They remind us that goodness, like evil, often thrives in the mundane moments, hidden in the flicker of everyday choices. But how sure are you that you'd be one of these quiet heroes? Let's hold up the mirror next, because the reflection may not be as comforting as you think. Now ask yourself, what would I do if I were in those situations? It's easy to say you'd never participate in cruelty, that you'd always speak up. But consider the psychological experiments that show how quickly people cave under authority or how easily they justify wrongdoing when it benefits them. The truth is, we tend to see ourselves as more ethical than we really are. Take a simple scenario. A coworker you like makes a borderline offensive joke. Do you call them out, or do you laugh nervously to fit in? Multiply that moral compromise by 1,000. And you can see how entire societies slip into barbarity with minimal resistance. Each little, "it's not a big deal," or "someone else will handle it," becomes a stepping stone on the road to larger horrors. The mirror test is about facing your own capacity for darkness. It's about realizing that, given the right pressures, fear, power, or systemic incentives, you too might commit acts you'd never have imagined. Instead of clinging to the illusion that you're immune, the real question is, under what conditions could I become the monster? By admitting that possibility, you open the door to understanding how to stop it. Still sure of your own goodness? Let's see how the potential for change runs both ways. Because if monsters can be made, maybe they can be unmade too. Here's the paradox. If good people can become monsters, then in theory, monsters can become human again. We've seen it happen when perpetrators meet their victims face to face, forced to confront the emotional fallout of their actions. Certain restorative justice programs have shown glimpses of hope. The once hateful radical who begins volunteering for the very community he once tormented, or the ex-corporate shark who dedicates her life to ethical business practices. But redemption isn't about a single apology. It's a commitment to ongoing repair. Often it requires active amends, funding charities for the people one has harmed, speaking at events to prevent others from following the same path, or publicly supporting reforms that address the damage done. Critics call these efforts naive, arguing that some monsters are beyond saving. Yet every so often, redemption sticks, and that single turnabout can influence countless others. Skepticism is healthy. Some will exploit "I've changed" as a convenient storyline to dodge accountability. Still, the possibility of genuine redemption means we can't simply dismiss every wrongdoer as irredeemable. If we did, we'd be ignoring the same complexity that allowed them to drift into darkness in the first place. But if redemption is possible for individuals, can an entire society guard itself against slipping into the void? That's where our moral immune system comes in, and it might be the only thing standing between us and the next nightmare. Systems create monsters, but systems can also protect us from our worst instincts. Think of it as society's moral immune system. When we install checks and balances that force us to confront our biases, like a mandatory ethics review for major decisions or anonymous hotlines that empower whistleblowers, we reduce the likelihood of ordinary people sliding into monstrous behavior. Some companies have begun implementing moral stress tests, simulating scenarios where employees face ethically compromised decisions. They practice pushing back, learning to say no early before small wrongs grow. Governments can do the same by requiring thorough oversight on policies that risk human rights violations. Schools can incorporate empathy training and conflict resolution from an early age, ensuring children learn to recognize cruelty before it becomes normalized. None of these safeguards guarantee will eradicate evil or corruption, but they do create speed bumps, moments of friction that force a second thought. And sometimes, that single moment of self-awareness can stop an avalanche of harm. The question is, will we actually use these safeguards or ignore them until it's too late? One final mirror awaits, and what it shows might just change everything. Imagine looking into a mirror that shows not just your reflection, but every moral choice you've ever made. Most of us would see glimpses of kindness, sure, but also moments we turned away when someone needed help, or times we benefited from systems that hurt others. Accepting that reflection is uncomfortable, yet it's the key to real self-awareness. When you realize that you've participated in small acts of harm, you become far more vigilant. You start asking questions. Do I know where this product comes from? Who suffers for my convenience? Am I ignoring someone's pain because it feels too hard to engage? Over time, these questions turn into habits. Instead of waiting until you're on the brink of doing something truly monstrous, you pause at the early warning signs. You realign before you drift too far. Some call it shadow work, others call it moral vigilance. Whatever the term, it's about nurturing the humility to admit that you, like anyone else, can become part of the problem. Once you grasp that, you can step onto a new path, daily, conscious choices that keep you rooted in empathy rather than complicit in cruelty. But even with this self-awareness, the last chapter remains. What do we do when all the pieces are in front of us? Let's bring everything together and face the final truth. We've walked through the slow, dangerous slopes where fear, power, and systems converge to twist good people into unwitting villains. We've peered at redemption arcs that prove not every monster stays a monster, and at small acts of heroism that blossom in the most unlikely places. But in the end, this isn't some distant morality tale. It's your story, too. Every day, you face choices that nudge you toward greater empathy or deeper indifference. Perhaps you believe your decisions are too small to matter, but history warns us that even the largest avalanches begin with a shift of pebbles. The same is true of monstrous acts. They often start as minor betrayals. If we recognize those betrayals for what they are and refuse them, even once, we might prevent the subsequent descent into darkness. So here's the final question. Will you spend your life insisting you're incapable of cruelty, or will you stay vigilant, knowing that the line between good and evil runs through every human heart? The mirror is right in front of you. It's cracked, but it's still there, reflecting every possibility of who you might become. Look into it carefully and choose which reflection you feed. No matter which path you walk after this, remember, you can always step back from the edge or help someone else do the same. The final choice is yours.